The Civil War had a profound impact on Kentucky. A quarter of the state's soldiers never returned. Agricultural markets, based on slave labor and Southern trade, collapsed. And like all of America, Kentucky struggled with Reconstruction and civil rights. Yet Kentucky's cities were largely spared the ravages of war. These growing manufacturing centers attracted a population on the move. The first generation of freed slaves, the sons and daughters of farmers, and a new wave of European immigrants. After the war, Kentucky would enter the age of industrialization with a full head of steam. Industrialization had a huge impact on port communities throughout Kentucky. This is illustrated at a 55-acre site along the Ohio River known as Portland Wharf Park. Over the past 6 years, archaeologist Jay Stotman has been working here to learn how this river community changed over time. During the mid-1800s, Portland Wharf flourished as a major commercial port on par with the landings at Louisville. Today, all vestiges of this river heritage are buried beneath the ground.
The archaeology in Portland Wharf Park has been well preserved. It's been buried beneath feet of silt from floods and development of the flood wall. Most of the archaeological resources are 2 to 4 feet below the surface, so they are protected beneath the ground, and everything that's left of the old Portland is still here. The remains of the buildings, foundations, sidewalks, remains of the streets, street curbing, old outhouse pits and cisterns, and there are thousands and thousands of artifacts, the objects of every day that people used in Portland back in the 19th century.
During the early 1800s, Portland served the portage business around the falls of the Ohio. These rapids were the only navigational barrier along the Ohio River. Portland, with its deep water wharf, thrived during the golden age of steamboats. French, Irish, and German immigrants formed a strong river community. But in the late 1800s, Portland began to decline. The Portland and Louisville Canal was expanded. Large steamboats no longer had to dock at Portland's wharf. The community was also devastated by a series of floods. Ultimately, the entire port vanished behind a flood wall built to protect neighborhoods on higher ground.
When we began this project, the people of Portland knew that they had a rich archaeological site. They knew that their history was buried beneath this park. What they did is they asked archaeologists to come in and find out not only what condition those archaeological resources are in, but how these archaeological resources might be able to benefit their community, and how we might be able to use archaeology to learn more about Portland's past.
Archaeologists surveyed the entire site. Park crews placed large ghost stones recovered from the old canal to mark the location of historic streets. Stotman then began to excavate the most promising sites, including lot number 56.
What we found at lot 56 is over 6 feet worth of archaeological deposits and strata. So we decided to focus in on this lot, thinking that we would get a really good idea of how Portland changed over time from the very beginning to the very latest part of the town's existence down here.
The stratigraphy of lot 56 holds an intriguing story. The lowest layers are natural deposits and river silt. The next layers contain debris from the early 1800s and an odd mixture of burned materials. From court records, Stotman learned that the home of the Mangan family, French immigrants, once stood here. The Mangan house mysteriously burned to the ground in 1856, one day after it was sold. Over the next 15 years, Lot 56 remained vacant, gathering dirt, trash, and debris.
and then a new property owner took it over and immediately built a house. And what we know quite a bit about this house because we found the actual archaeological remains of the house. Foundations associated with the house, sidewalks, lots of artifacts associated with the construction of this building. And we think that this building was very typical of the kinds of houses that were being built in Portland and Louisville during the 1870s. It was a shotgun house.
This is the home of Henry and Catherine Veit, immigrants from Prussia. In the 1850s, Henry Veit established a shoemaker's shop on Water Street. His family lived above the workplace in a small apartment. At that time, Portland Wharf was filled with large steamboats from southern markets. His business grew. By 1873, the Veit family had enough money to build a modest home on Lot 56. Henry Veit died in 1878 as Portland Wharf began its decline. Catherine Veit rode out 3 major floods until finally leaving the house in 1921. The Veit's shotgun house was one of the last remaining structures before the entire riverfront was bulldozed for construction of the flood wall.
So we have archaeological deposits that we can see and artifacts from each period that shows us Portland at its very beginning, and Portland when it was at its busiest time, and then Portland during its decline. So we can see the whole story of Portland seen in the archaeological layers that we have documented here at Lot 56.
In 2007, the community of Portland celebrated a new milestone in the history of Portland Wharf. The site earned listing on the National Register of Historic Places. Officials also unveiled master plans for a unique urban park based in large part on archaeology.
Archaeology in Portland Wharf Park is not only a way to learn more about the history of Portland and find out about the facts of the history of Portland, but it's also a way to reconnect the community with that history.
That is my great-grandfather's great-great-grandfather's farmhouse at 40th and was it 40th and Broadway.
It's an active way to get the people involved in learning about their history.
And this is Water Street.
The curb starts right over there, and this is still some of the...
Oh, isn't that something?
What archaeology does is it gives them an avenue to access that past, to touch that past, and then use that past to help benefit their community today.
Archaeologists have documented thousands of sites from the late 1800s in Kentucky. Each reveals a little more about the state during the Industrial Revolution. In Frankfort, archaeologists recovered an unusual assortment of artifacts from the old state capital Privy. The Privy contained coins, pins, bottles, marbles, campaign buttons, spittoons, and a handgun. This collection offers a fascinating glimpse into the lives of legislators during the mid and late 1800s. In Jefferson County, the excavation of a privy vault confirmed the presence of indoor plumbing at the U.S. Marine Hospital. Opened in 1852, the hospital contained revolutionary designs for ventilation and sanitation. Today, scholars visit this National Historic Landmark to study its architecture and a century of medical service to boatmen, soldiers, and residents. And in Kenton County, archaeologist Bob Genheimer led one of the largest urban excavations ever conducted in Kentucky. Before development of Covington's riverfront, archaeologists documented a 3-block area with remnants of residential and commercial buildings from the 1800s. The research uncovered dozens of intact foundations, cisterns, privies, pottery kilns, and glass ovens, all preserved when the site was buried to raise the land above river flood levels. This investigation revealed numerous details about 19th century pottery and glass industries, as well as insights into the hidden lives of factory workers. Tens of thousands of artifacts were recovered from 9 privy shafts. This incredible collection gave archaeologists valuable data about local and national products and details about life in Kentucky's growing cities.
With industrialization in Kentucky, we see a lot more urbanization, cities growing, and that's something that historic archaeology can really help with. We can start to look at how neighborhoods developed and how people have come in such close proximity to each other through urbanization that created by industrialization. We can see how people have to deal with the problems of living together and see how they adapted to city life. So this was new for Kentucky at this time, and it laid the groundwork for what Kentucky would become in the future.